If you've been watching my videos for a while, you've probably started to notice a pattern about the timing I use for going to war. Gaul can pursue science victory, culture victory, or even domination victory. Our push is also timed with unlocking the government of fascism, which grants 50% extra production towards all units, as well as 5 additional combat strength in all combat. As outlined previously, we don't kill our target as quickly as possible. Instead, we seek to maximize the amount of science we can get out of pillaging them. Combined with all of the free arenas. Welcome to the Arabia Civ Spotlight for Multiplayer Civ 6 with a better balanced game.
Helicopter, helicopter!
You get the point. The modern era is the ideal time to wage war in free-for-all multiplayer Civ 6. In today's video, we'll be covering why this is such a great timing for warfare, as well as how to launch a successful push ourselves. First off, to understand why modern era war is so profitable in multiplayer games, we have to understand why early game wars are not. Civ is about as snowbally as a game can be. A small loss of tempo early on will leave lasting impacts on our pace for the rest of the game. Spending our production on units in the early game when we could instead be spending it on infrastructure slows us down tremendously. This effect is exacerbated by the fact that the cost of constructing new districts scales with the number of technologies and civics we've completed. If we don't place down our districts early, we're going to have to pay more for them later. Even if we have powerful unique units that ensure we'll eventually win our early game wars, the fact of the matter is that wars in the classical era just take too long. On online game speed, production costs are halved, while unit move speed remains unchanged compared to standard game speed. This means that it's extremely difficult to blitz down an unprepared opponent early on, as units move very slowly and defenders can materialize a military twice as quickly as they could in a standard speed game. Eventually, however, the industrial era rolls around, and wars start getting quite a bit faster as military engineers enter the fray to build roads, and fast-moving cavalry units become more powerful. Furthermore, as players have much more developed land at this stage of the game, there are more opportunities to pillage, which is critical for recouping the lost tempo from building a military. However, even at this stage of the game, wars are generally still only waged in free-for-all games in order to pick off the stragglers who have fallen too far behind to adequately defend themselves. We still haven't finished building all of our critical infrastructure, after all. There's factories, wonders, research labs, etc., which we need to build ASAP in order to keep up with the rest of the lobby. Take this game, for instance. Something clearly went critically wrong for Gandhi, our neighbor, and he's fallen way behind the rest of the lobby. Even still, he'd normally be able to defend himself well enough for a war to not be worthwhile. However, the problem for him is that his government plaza is built in his closest city to our border. In order to make enough units to meaningfully slow us down, he needs to use the ability of the Grand Master's Chapel, a building constructed in the government plaza that allows him to buy military units with faith. However, as we can blitz down his government plaza city immediately, he loses access to this building and is forced to produce all of his units the old-fashioned way. Because his production is so low, he can't actually mount a meaningful defense like this. The result is that we never have to reinforce our army. All of our cities can continue building infrastructure like theater squares, campuses, and factories so that we never fall behind. Eventually, however, as we finish putting up our research labs, something interesting happens. We run out of infrastructure to build. This is pretty much the end of the line when it comes to improving our cities. There are only 2 ways that we can spend our production now. 1. We can spend it on pursuing win conditions, such as spaceports for science victory or theater square projects for culture victory. 2. We can spend it on military. In this game, it doesn't look like we can beat the Ottomans in a race for a science victory, nor does it look like we can beat Russia in a race for a culture victory. Therefore, the only thing we can really do is start gearing up for war. We're not the only one who makes this decision, however. It seems Norway is trying his own hand at a modern era timing push against our ally, China. Unfortunately for him, he ends up getting deadlocked and doesn't make any real progress. He doesn't know the secret strategies for modern era warfare. Must not be a Herson viewer. So, we set out on a quest to help Norway by demonstrating how to properly wage war with tanks and artillery. First, let's discuss how to prepare in the turns leading up to the war. The first thing to note is how the tech tree is constructed. Combustion, which unlocks tanks, has extremely few prerequisites, one of which also unlocks artillery. This means that you can put together a modern-era army just by beelining the bottom of the tech tree. In fact, it's even possible to unlock tanks without ever researching sailing. However, pathing straight for combustion is ill-advised. First off, it entails skipping industrialization, which is the best non-military technology in the entire game. Secondly, rushing for combustion means we won't have the time or prerequisite techs needed to trigger all of the Eurekas along the way, meaning that we'd be paying way more science for each technology. While skipping the entire top half of the tech tree in favor of rushing tanks seems like it'd let us unlock them sooner, the reality is that missing all of these Eurekas means that we wouldn't actually get to combustion much faster than if we had just teched for industrialization first. So, after unlocking industrialization, now we start teching for combustion. Well, sometimes. After unlocking industrialization, it's really a toss-up between rushing straight for combustion or making a pit stop at the chemistry technology first in order to unlock research labs. Unlocking research labs sooner sets us up for long-term success, but doing so sets us back 7 whole technologies compared to rushing straight for combustion. The decision is really a question of safety. Can we afford to delay unlocking all of these powerful military technologies, or are we in too much danger? Here, we're feeling pretty safe, so we go for chemistry before combustion. As we start approaching the technologies that will unlock tanks and artillery, we want to make sure that we pre-build enough military units. Pre-building refers to the act of making earlier era versions of the units we actually want, and then spending gold to upgrade them the same turn we unlock the necessary tech. In this game, we already have a ton of military units from our earlier war with Gandhi, so we'll take a look at the Netherlands game from my previous video in order to get a more typical example. Pre-building will not only allow us to have an army of tanks online as soon as we unlock combustion, it's also way more efficient than training tanks directly. Let's examine why. First off, discount policy cards. We can use the Chivalry policy card for 50% extra production towards industrial era cavalry units, making it fairly cheap to pump out a ton of cuirassiers. However, the policy card required for extra production towards tanks is unlocked all the way here at ideology, which means that it'll often take until quite a while after unlocking tanks for us to unlock the card needed to produce them quickly. The 50% extra production policy cards are equivalent to a 33% discount on all units of their type. If we compare the cost of pre-building a cuirassier army and then spending gold to upgrade it using the professional army policy card against the cost of producing a tank outright with no discount card, the imperative for pre-building becomes obvious. Tanks are prohibitively expensive to produce outright, so we need to make sure we pre-build a ton of them from the get-go. Don't forget artillery too. We also want to make sure that we pre-build a ton of bombards as well. I recommend preparing at least 3 cores, but the more the merrier. Bringing a ton of artillery is key, as players will unlock 300 health walls in every city in their empire upon unlocking the steel technology, rendering it impossible to kill cities without a ton of artillery. Just because you have artillery, however, doesn't mean you know how to properly use them. At first, they appear to be very slow. When moving through rough terrain, they lose all of their movement points instantly, and they can't move and fire on the same turn. However, this can be solved by including the final elements of a well-rounded modern military. Military engineers and a great general. These 2 units completely solve all of the problems faced by artillery. With a railroad reducing the movement cost of every tile to 0.25 and a great general granting +1 movement and allowing artillery to move and shoot on the same turn, our artillery become able to move up to 11 tiles per turn and still have 0.25 movement points left, which is all it takes for a great general's passive effect to allow them to still fire on that same turn. With proper management of military engineers and a great general, our artillery should be able to spend the entire war shooting every single turn without rest. Without building railroads or having a great general, artillery would spend most turns just moving around and being unable to shoot, turning what should be a quick war into a slog that takes forever. This is likely one of the mistakes that Norway made when launching a war against China in this game. There are no railroads in sight, so we can imagine that their artillery pieces spend so much time moving that they barely get to actually shoot anything. There is one last thing we need to be building before we start a modern era war, and that's military academies. We want at least 3 of these. While the extra experience they grant and the ability they provide to train corps and armies directly at a 25% discount are obviously very strong, what's not obvious to a lot of players is how important the oil they provide is. Multiplayer games are typically played with a better balanced game mod, and one of the changes this mod makes is to grant +2 oil per turn on all military academies. Since we can't know for sure how much oil we'll have in our land until we unlock the refining technology, which is literally right before we want to start our push, we have to make enough military academies to be safe in case we end up without any natural oil in our land. 3 academies is the minimum we want, but more is always better. It's worth noting that a tank singleton and a tank army both cost only 1 oil upkeep per turn, which is one of the reasons we want to put all of our units into formations in order to maximize the amount of units our oil can support. Putting it all together, we can finally launch our war against Norway. Their science is lower than ours, but that doesn't really matter. They rush straight for combustion without going for research labs like we did, so in terms of war technologies, we're equal for now. The problem for them is their lack of culture. This means that they haven't yet unlocked the Lightning Warfare Policy card, which is required to discount tanks, meaning that they have to pay the painful full production cost for every new tank they make. Our culture is abnormally high this game, so not only do we have this card, we also have the fascism government, which grants +5 combat strength on all units, as well as 50% production towards all units. Furthermore, having a tier 3 government unlocks the War Department, a super powerful government plaza building that heals all units for 20 HP every time they kill an enemy unit. But what if we didn't have such excellent culture? Jumping back to the Dutch game for a moment, we see the solution. Our units prioritize pillaging everything they can that yields culture. Culture pillages should always be prioritized in modern era war in order to unlock the fascism government as quickly as possible. It should be noted that we want to keep the policy card for 50% extra yields from pillaging active in our government for the entirety of this war. It's insanely strong. After we unlock fascism, we can just ignore culture pillages in favor of gold and science pillages. During the early stages of a modern era war, we don't actually want to be producing more tanks and artillery. Instead, our cities focus on producing significantly cheaper industrial era light cavalry. The principles we discussed earlier about pre-building efficiency remain true even now. Instead of building more tanks, which are incredibly expensive, we're pre-building helicopters instead. Helicopters are unlocked at the synthetic materials technology, which is just 2 techs down the line from combustion. However, these 2 techs are very expensive, so we want to trigger the Eureka for them if we can. This typically means that our tech pathing after combustion will be flight, then plastics, then synthetic materials. Flight unlocks aerodromes so we can trigger the Eureka for synthetic materials, but that's not all it does. It also unlocks observation balloons, a powerful support unit which increases the range of all siege units in a 1 hex radius by 1. We always want to add an observation balloon to our army ASAP. Ideally, this is done by pillaging some gold from our target and then buying it in a city we've conquered. We also, of course, need to pillage enough gold to afford all of our helicopter upgrades as well. However, our target in this Netherlands game isn't really able to put up much of a fight, so we'll set it aside now to look at the Congo game, where our target is considerably more capable of defending themselves. Here, we get to see the power of helicopters. These units ignore all terrain movement cost penalties, and completely ignore zone of control. This makes them perfect for pillaging tiles. If a helicopter gets promoted twice, it can even grab a promotion that makes pillaging only cost a single point of movement. This is when they really start popping off and the pillage economy really gets going. So, what do we spend all of the gold we're pillaging on? The answer lies in the next technology we go for after synthetic materials, advanced flight. Bombers are very powerful and very expensive. Furthermore, unlike land units, there's no way to pre-build them. Therefore, in order to get our hands on them quickly, our army pillages a ton of gold off of our targets so that we can buy bombers directly. Moving these into our conquests, they start melting enemy cities. At this point, Norway is just evaporating under our attack. On the opposite side of the world, Russia and the Ottomans are still duking it out in a race of culture victory versus science victory. However, for some reason, Russia just gets tired and gives up on culture victory, agreeing to concede the game for third place, granting us second and letting the Ottomans take first. Despite how much weaker the Ottoman Empire is than us, we can't actually stop them from winning science victory because our alliance won't expire fast enough to let us declare war on them in time. Once again, Andrew steals another first place with 50 strength walls in all of his cities. Sometimes I look at the all-time ranked leaderboard in CPL and wonder how he actually got up there. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you want to catch full games of Civ 6 live, be sure to follow me on Twitch, which I've linked in the description. I have many more guides like this one on all sorts of aspects of Multiplayer Civ 6, so be sure to check out the rest of my channel if you like this video. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button. That's all. Herson signing out.